Hey folks, Paul Carlson here with Safety Solutions Academy. So glad that you're here with me out at the range today. We're going to talk today about one of the important foundational aspects of shooting, and that's our stance. I've got some tips for you, so tune in. Let's get to it. I'm a professional defensive shooting instructor. And as far as I'm concerned, the most important word in that whole big phrase is defensive. It's one of the core principles that defines what it is that I teach and why it is that I teach it. Everything that we do needs to be from a defensive foundation. It needs to work not just with shooting, but also from a defensive standpoint. Now, when we look at our stance, it may not be the most optimal shooting stance. Remember, this is about defense, and it needs to be a solid defensive stance, even if sometimes it gives up a little bit from a shooting standpoint. And that's what we're going to look at today, what a solid defensive shooting stance is and why it's important. Both shooting and personal protection are athletic endeavors. And when we do anything athletic, we want to have a solid foundation that allows us to be steady and at the same time allows for economy of motion. And our stance is going to do just that. We're going to start out at the very bottom with our feet. First off, I want my feet to be on a set of railroad tracks towards my threat. Having my feet on this set of railroad tracks does a couple of things. First of all, having my feet square to the target makes my hips and my shoulders square to the target. This helps to make me solid and able to resist an impact coming from this direction. If my threat were to crash into me, I'm much more likely to be able to stand my ground if my hips and my shoulders are squared up to my threat. And that starts with our feet being squared up. Those feet are going to be about a shoulder width apart. Go ahead and take that shoulder width stance right now, squared up to whatever it is that you're perceiving your threat to be. When we've got our feet shoulder width apart, we have a position that allows us to be stable, but at the same time, our feet aren't so far apart that we're not able to move efficiently. Our feet can be staggered just a little bit. A normal footstep forward or back is just fine. We may not have the opportunity to choose what our exact stance is, and so a normal stance that we would use for walking every day makes a ton of sense to apply for defensive shooting. Next, we're going to bend our knees. We bend our knees because it's a natural response to lower our center of gravity anytime that we are surprised or startled. In addition to that, lowering our center of gravity allows us to be athletic. We can easily move from side to side, forward, backward, whatever the case might be. Having those knees bent and the feet shoulder width apart partner together well for good athletic movement. And remember, self-defense is an athletic endeavor. We talked about our hips already. They're squared up to the target. One of the things we need to do is our knees move forward a little bit. Our tail end probably sticks out just a touch to balance that out. I want my weight to be just about centered on the balls of my feet. My shoulders are going to be slightly forward over the tops of my knees and square with my target, and my head is going to be just a little bit forward of that. Once I establish this kind of a stance, it allows me to do just about everything I need to do from a shooting standpoint fairly efficiently. Again, it's not perfect. It's not the best shooting stance, but it's a shooting stance that allows us to shoot as well as we can while at the same time remaining very mobile for a defensive situation. So let's go ahead and let's step out of that for a second and then just drop back into that ready position. We've got toes on a set of railroad tracks towards our threat, knees over the top of our toes, tail end out just a little bit, shoulders just forward of the knees, everything squared up to the target. We're ready to deal with whatever we need to deal with. Relax again and drop into that stance. We've got feet about shoulder width apart on a set of railroad tracks to the threat, knees over the tops of the toes, tail end out just a little bit, shoulders over the tops of the knees, everything squared up to the threat. This is the kind of shooting stance that we want to have. So folks, when it comes to having a platform that's successful for defensive shooting, don't forget the operative word is defensive. We need a platform that's not just going to work for shooting, but is also going to work for self-defense as well. This athletic stance that I've taught you today is an outstanding stance for being prepared to deal with a self-defense scenario. And it's probably the stance that you're naturally going to adopt should you ever be faced with a violent encounter. Now folks, the key to this stance or any other stance is actually practicing it. So I'm going to encourage you to get on out there. Get yourself some training. When you do, make sure you keep it simple. Please stay safe, and as always, Have a great day.